welcome to all of you. It's great to have you here for our special industry discussion on behalf of GSX Exchange, Global Sustainability Exchange. I would like to warmly welcome you all. Tonight we have a very interesting subject, or I should say tonight or this morning, for all of you that are on the other side of the world, macro considerations of air quality relating to climate, air pollution, and COVID-19. Air pollution, climate, COVID, they are all linked with one another. COVID has hit us very hard. Despite all of the challenges, the encouraging thing that we could see was governments took very fast action. Maybe with climate change, because it's moving so slowly, the threat is in the future. Here and there, it's hitting us already today, but we haven't taken this stern action yet. With COVID, we might find a vaccine. With climate change, once it's there, difficult to turn the clock back. Air pollution, macro, overall, how many people is it killing? What on a basic level indoor at your home? So we have a lot of facets of this subject. That's why I'm really looking forward today. The flow is that the first 20 minutes we will have our speakers share. Then the speakers between themselves will have a 10-minute panel discussion. And then we will open up the room to all of you to share, ask questions, and contribute. So welcome, everybody. And I have the great pleasure of introducing very, very briefly our first speaker, Marcelo Mena. You can say a little bit more about yourself, Marcelo. I just mentioned that you used to be the environmental minister in Chile, so you can really look at this from a hands-on and macro perspective. And Marcelo will be sharing on air quality, climate change mitigation in the case of Chile, like a country case study. What have they done? What have they achieved? And what can we learn from that? So Marcelo, I would like to hand over to you. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. So Marcelo Mena. I'm a professor in environmental engineering, biochemical engineering, but I've been a scientist. I'm a atmospheric scientist. So I come very much from the science side, and I do a lot of research on this. And so therefore, becoming a minister was a fulfillment of an interest that I had, because I wanted to make bigger impact on air quality. Around 4 years ago, the WHO and the Climate Clean Air Coalition, which I led for 2 years, launched this Breathe Life campaign, in which highlighted the fact that today we have a huge pandemic that kills 7 million people a year, which is air pollution, most of it from indoor and outdoor air quality. But also, as we talk about pollution, we don't remember sometimes that we are winning the fight, and we are winning the fight. And Santiago was one of the first cities to do so. And the EPA recently did a report analyzing what would have happened had we not taken action, and what are the benefits we've achieved in reducing roughly 70% of the annual air pollution in Santiago. And so today we have around 10,000 premature cases of mortality that are prevented. But in 2014-15, I'll just go back a little bit more. We started facing this air pollution issue again, because we started using the PM 2.5 standard, which highlighted that we had not 3 episodes of PM10, but roughly 83 episodes of PM 2.5 exceedances a year. And so, and this came at the same time as Chile became better in soccer, and we got deeper into the contest. And as we were doing so, a lot of people were celebrating. So we had obliterated records of air quality episodes with some of these barbecues. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that we've had this very deep cultural fight that was highlighted recently in Nature by a paper. But also, I just wanted to say that this premature mortality has been reduced, but at the same time, had we not taken these actions, if you look at what Harvard has shown regarding the lethality of PM 2.5, for every microgram per cubic meter annual average, they saw a rise in lethality in around 8%. And so therefore, had we not taken all these actions, we'd be talking about 16,000 deaths in Chile instead of the 7,300, which are huge, that we have today. There's some decreases in air pollution that has occurred these last months due to the lower activity. But this is something that we had focused on mostly, which was Santiago for many years. But in 2011, when I was a professor, when I was an activist, I'm very much an activist. I did a report that was shown in newspapers that highlighted the fact that Santiago's air quality was much better than most cities in Chile, and that we were ignoring this pollution, and we needed to adopt this new, more stringent standard. And we announced a decontamination process, a pollution control strategy that was much faster and ambitious than it had been before. We did around 14 new attainment programs within 4 years, whereas in the previous 18 years, 10 had been done. And we blended an approach with environment and the energy sector working together. And some of the big things that we had done is that we had ignored before was in Chile, most homes were very poorly insulated, and this caused a large demand in energy use. And this was only met by cheap, dirty, and wet wood use that was also associated to deforestation. And so our programs were, focused on taking out dirty wood burning stoves, replacing them with clean fuels, including electricity, natural gas, kerosene, pellets, supporting dry wood projects. And this has been very successful with also home insulation projects that retrofit insulation, reducing energy demand 30-40%, and allowing these cheaper fuels to be more competitive and creating a net savings for people. We also had regulations, carbon taxes I'm very proud of that we designed that were linking air pollution and CO2 pollution. And so this is very novel. There's not a lot of taxes that are done in this design. And one of the things that we charged for was the emissions for particulate matter, the attainment status of a location, population that's exposed to pollution, very much charging the polluter the externalities that are caused directly. And most of this tax is collected because of the coal-fired, boilers and turbines for the power sector, large industry, with less so with diesel, with oil and natural gas. And these changes have been substantial. These have reduced pollution tremendously. This is a picture of that was from 2009, before we had the emission standards set in place with no emissions controls. And we have reduced these emissions. If you look at what the power plant emissions are after the tax and after the standard, we've reduced particulate matter emissions in around 80%, SO2 emissions around 65%, and with an increase of power generation also. But also more importantly, the agro-industrial sector has reached a reduction of emissions around 95%. And this is a mix of a carbon tax, a pollution tax, and emission standards set within pollution attainment programs. So they couldn't dodge any of those bullets, and they ended up cleaning up fast because they wanted to have less tax to pay. The reduction of pollution has been substantial within the years that we started taking action. And so Coyhaique, for example, if you look at these annual averages, there's some that are huge, right? Coyhaique, for example, started out with 66 micrograms per cubic meter annual average, which is the worst in Latin America. Since we started taking these plans, they are no longer the worst Latin America, and other cities are so. Santiago's reduction of pollution was substantial also, and other cities like Temuco. And so therefore, we estimate the reduced premature mortality rate has been around 2,200 cases per year. This is also shown evidence of reduction of respiratory disease. Emergency room visits in places that we took action dropped in 17% without controls of emissions. They rose in 7%, and we have around 500,000 emergency room visits less per year between those years, mostly benefiting children between 0 and 4 years old. Sort of a surgical reduction you could see only in the cities that we took action, and we do not see this effect in the places that we did not take action. There's some effects due to the tobacco laws that we also enacted in recent years. But I just wanted to highlight that climate action and air pollution action need to be integrated. Because the reductions of black carbon will help us meet the 1.5 degree standard with more efficiency. But also, if you put our net zero target which has a net reduction of costs per ton of CO2 because of the net zero target, and you add the environmental benefits, the direct air pollution benefits, you find that there's a 5-fold increase. I just wanted to finalize saying it's important to measure. And because had we not measured, we had not taken action. And having to face my nation and saying why 6 out of the 10 most polluted cities in Latin America are in Chile, I would have to say also to them, yes, we have to tackle it, but also we have around 60% of the measurement capacity in Latin America. So it's a little bit of an unfair thing. And hopefully other countries also measure, because if you do not measure, you're not taking action to protect your people. So a lot of progress has been made. A lot more needs to be done. But without awareness, no progress would have been made at all.
All right, Marcelo, great. That was an amazing presentation. Excellent case studies with real results and real deliverables. Just one quick question. How did you get the support from people for this carbon tax, the masses, and what was the money being used for subsequently, the money that was collected as the carbon tax?
Yeah, we threw the carbon tax in a big tax reform. So it was many knives that we threw at the system and they couldn't dodge them all. And so therefore it landed. But also we targeted for the power sector, which nobody would defend. And so therefore, it was a consensus. It was 100% approval during in the passage of that bill. And the other thing is that we did not, for example, for the fuel tax, for the car tax, instead of raising fuel taxes, what we did was to raise the price of a new car. And the price of a new cars are bought by rich people, and we corrected it by the price of the cars. So therefore, cheaper cars for lower income people would pay less of a tax, but it was still focused on NOx emissions, and therefore hitting a lot of the diesel emission scandal. So and the diesel manufacturers were in a very difficult position to fight back because they were in the middle of this scandal. So what's it used for? Constitutional limitations do not allow us to use it for particular purposes. We have to have it for the general budget. But this is largely justified for the free universities for the 60% poorest people in Chile. That was the justification.
Mm-hmm. All right, great, excellent. Thank you for that great, quick clarification. And that was a very good scene-setting presentation, the big picture stuff, and some real hardcore measures that particularly as well here in Southeast Asia would be very, very relevant and potentially very, very effective, but they've never really been taken to that level that I've just heard with regards to what Chile has done. So next up is Krista. She is the director and co-founder of OpenAQ. She will be sharing with us the state of air quality. They have data from all over the world, and we will now move internationally. What is really the state that we have in terms of air quality data on an international level? Krista, please unmute yourself, share a little bit more about you and your presentation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. As said, I'm Krista Hazencope, the co-founder and director of OpenAQ. I think my portion of the call tags very well to Marcelo's on the point of measuring, how important it is to measure and share that you're measuring air quality data. So my presentation will be on the state of global play of air quality data across the world, largely outdoor air quality data produced by governments. The contents of this is actually in a report we released just today. There's a URL on my screen and on the following slides where you can see that information in more detail. And I'll relate it to how we see our community and various folks around the world using this information to inform measures and impacts and just really understanding the state of play around COVID-19 and air quality as well. So with that, sort of the motivation for why data sharing infrastructure is important for air pollution is that data sharing infrastructure is invisible but foundational for solving air pollution. Just like the most high-flying skyscrapers require foundations, behind the scenes, the most effective solutions for air pollution, or really even understanding how COVID-19 is affecting us right now in relation to air pollution requires access to data in the first place. So I'm going to get into 3 findings we had found from the global state of play very quickly, and then related to COVID-19. So the first is that we have found that half of the world's governments produce public air quality data in some form, which is awesome, but it leaves out 1.4 billion people from access to public air quality information, and often in some of the most polluted places across the world. The second finding we found is that 4 out of 10 governments share real-time air quality information, and this leaves out about 2.1 billion people, though, who don't have access to that information for their direct use, but also for all kinds of uses that information can be brought into in systems. So from research to policy to the media to tech, this information, if shared in a fully open manner, can be incorporated and isn't when that information is not available in real time or in a fully open manner. So the third finding we found from this report is a little bit more nuanced, but pretty important, and a small gap that can really unleash a lot of impact. And it was that 30 governments across the world generate real-time outdoor air quality data, but don't yet share them in a fully open manner. So programmatically available in a machine-readable form, station-level data as opposed to averaged over a city or a region, physical quantities of air quality information rather than an air quality index or an API or PSI or any of the index-type values for pollution that are useful for communicating to the public, but aren't the sort of raw material that a lot of use cases require. So we see from OpenAQ huge amounts of data produced by, for example, India and China, and also wonderful air quality data produced by Singapore in huge amounts that are very beneficial for the public, but they're not yet shared in a fully open manner. So this limits either their reliability for access or the ways that they can be used downstream from their generation. So I'm going to mention a few ways that we've seen the OpenAQ community for the data that is available across the world that we've aggregated and harmonized into one format for outdoor air quality information produced by governments, how we've seen that information used by our community to address this very tangled relationship between air quality and COVID-19. In general. And so as some context too, so the platform where folks access the data for OpenAQ, it gets about 250 million requests to the system every year. So it's well used, and it gives us a very unique perspective on seeing exactly how this information is being used right now. So one example we'll pull from comes from India. So this is work by Urban Emissions, and specifically Dr. Sharat Gurukunda, who has pulled data from OpenAQ. The underlying data is from the government of India. He's accessed, in this case, nitrogen dioxide concentrations in Delhi, and he noticed during the onset of the lockdown period in Delhi that there was a decline in NO2, which this is seen in many places across the world. One of the things that he noticed in particular, or applied this to, is the idea that this is a great example for a case study for him and really India to evaluate whether the current standards and policies make sense at a baseline air quality level, sort of the baseline standards that are set, whether they make practical sense or not. So it's been interesting to see a side effect of the lockdowns across the globe is that they have this very, very singular power to look at baseline air quality levels that it can inform these government standards and policies downstream. The second and last example I'll give is we've seen this similar example done globally by a group in Norway for 27 different countries. Meanwhile, this study that was done by this Norwegian group pulled data from the OpenAQ platform. Again, government data is the underlying data they're pulling, and meshed to with satellite information. Meanwhile, it came up in Marcelo's talk as well, and I'm sure many are familiar. There's several separate reports on how air pollution impacts COVID-19 patients and can also impact sort of public health during times right now with COVID. And so there's interesting questions, we think, for insights on the role that open air quality data plays with, in general, air quality's impact on public health and what can be gleaned from these lockdown periods, though that's a bit difficult epidemiologically to determine. But also there is power in using existing air quality data that's openly available to model forecasts, to understand and predict the impact of COVID-19 on populations, and also correspondingly to mitigate that. So, what policies can be put in place to prioritize reducing air pollution so the impact of COVID-19 on particular populations and citizens is reduced or at least minimized. So with that, that's the comments we have seen from OpenAQ's perspective. Again, that State of Global Play report is linked there. We also recently went into have a blog post on Amazon Web Services that goes into more detail about COVID-19 and air quality open data, but looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Krista. So we're really getting hot off the press latest report data from you. That's excellent. And I think after this crisis, there's nobody out there anymore that doesn't believe that there's a very substantial link between human activity, industrial and traffic and other things, and air quality, because we've all seen it, and the scientific data that can be supported by the data that is available on your platform is showing it as well. So that is as well an interesting subject for the discussion later on, how we can build that into policies and how we can then, learn more from how we can even improve the health of people and the resilience of people through better air quality in the long term. So from macro perspective, we're going to look onto the micro perspective now with our final presenter, Dr. Albert. I thought I have to get him on board because I was hosting another webinar a couple of weeks ago where he gave a fascinating presentation on indoor air quality monitoring, which can, I think, complement as well the data that Krista has and the macro policy level activities that Marcelo was talking about. So looking at the indoor data and as well, Dr. Albert is going to give us some input on the virus index that they have developed, where they have tried to identify from existing research under what criteria has the virus got minimum survival time with regards to the air quality parameters. So Dr. Albert, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Matthias, for this nice introduction. And what I would like to do is to discuss with you how we can protect ourselves against COVID-19. I was intrigued by a report of the Dutch Health Institute recently, where they looked at the locations of the infections of COVID-19. And what you can see here that the majority of the infections are indoors, mainly coming from homes, followed by work. I would like to discuss with you the introduction of the virus alert. Then I want to go into detail of the clinical and medical aspects of COVID-19. I'm a physician, so I'm really interested in these kind of things. Then I want to give you an introduction about the identification of the spread of a virus, and then some protection measures. For those of you who are not familiar with Yoo-Hoo is a digital health company and a manufacturer of advanced and affordable air quality measurement equipment and software. We are providing data, insight, alerts, and advice on the relationship between indoor air quality and health. We have created a lot of use cases since we came to market a couple of years ago. And we have received a lot of credentials from the indoor environment in homes, offices, workspaces, hospitals, and also we are working very closely together with governments. Recently, and I'm talking about 3 weeks ago, we have introduced worldwide the virus alert. And we are using air quality data within homes and workplaces to create an environment that helps to deactivate viruses and enhance the immune system to be less susceptible for virus infections. COVID-19 belongs genetically to the coronaviruses, and they need a natural host and an intermediate host to get at the end to the human being. About COVID-19, the majority of the infections are mild, 50% is severe, and 5% of the patients are coming on the ICU unit. The transmissibility is high, and the fatality rate is, roughly speaking, 2%, and people over 60 years of age and with heart or lung diseases are more susceptible for these kind of infections. But people have to realize that these corona infections has been among us for ages, and they also will be among us in the future. About the early symptoms of COVID-19, they are pretty similar to air pollution, especially concerning the respiratory tract system. You can see it here on this slide. About the transmission and the contamination, the following. You have an infected person, and via a direct contact, the large droplets, so more than 10 microgram, and on a distance less than 1 meter, they could infect a person. There's also an indirect contact via versus of physical objects. And then there is more and more attention now to the so-called airborne transmission. These are droplet nucleids, very small ones, and they can circulate in the air for hours. And last but not least, we have also the fecal-oral route. About the super spread, a very nice example of this was a Chinese restaurant where the ventilation in one part of the restaurant was very poor, and one person infected more than 9 other persons. And the infection distribution is consistent with the spread of pattern and exhaled virus load aerosols driven by the air-conditioned circulation flow. So this is apparently a very important parameter. Also, humidity is playing a role. Virus particles are most inactive at an humidity level of around 50%. And virus particles have a long-standing viability farther away from the medium value, which you can see here, plateauing at 20% on this side and 80% on the other side. Air pollution is playing a role also in the COVID-19 pandemic, especially the chronic exposure to PM2.5 or NO2, which will increase the susceptibility for this infection, and the host defense will go down. At the end, there will be a high viral load coming to the patient, and that will, at the end, have a high rate of infections and a high rate of mortality. Based on these data and information, EU has created a so-called virus index, in which is built up in 4 categories. So the environment we are measuring in a room, and when it's good, then the virus survival is low, and airborne virus spread is unlikely. And you can also see when it is red and the data and the measured data are out of range, then the virus survival is high and airborne virus spread is likely. This is seen on your app, and it is based on real-time monitoring. One of the protection measures, simple things you can do yourself: wash your hands, keep a distance, try your best not to touch your eyes, cover your mouth, and seek medical attention if you have difficult breathing and have high fever. And last but not least, pay attention to the EU virus alert in your house or working place. You give recommendations, what would be the optimum for temperature, PM 2.5, NO2, humidity, and carbon dioxide. And also you was advising and offering a catalog of solutions. So make your home and workplace safe and healthy for less than $1 or €1 per day. Thank you for listening, and I'm ready to take your questions.
Thanks so much, Albert. So really, we should have as little PM 2.5 in the home and make sure our humidity is around 50 to 60% and temperature is modest. Then we are kind of safer than normally. There was one question already coming in asking for clarification. What exactly is PM 2.5? Can one of you, one of the three speakers, clarify that in a short and distinct way?
Sure. So particulate, it's just particulate matter or smoke and dust pollution of a particular size that's small enough to get into your body and cause harmful effects.
Yeah.
So just smoke and dust pollution. Yeah,
and the smaller the particle is, and you have particles of 10, 5, 2.5. The smaller the particle, the deeper it goes into your body, the lungs, and the circulation.
And there's roughly two types of sources, both that are directly emitted, like combustion, diesel, coal, wood, dirty fuels, and secondary formation, which is precursors that form in the atmosphere. And therefore, the sources, depending on the city, are transportation, industry, and many times underestimated dirty fuel use.
Yeah, here in my home where I live in the Philippines, my main source of PM 2.5 is the cooking in the kitchen and the open burning in the neighborhood, which is kind of illegal, but it's happening regularly, especially in the morning or in the evening. So a lack of enforcement can contribute to it as well, beside those macro level emissions that Marcelo mentioned. Now, we all agree that we need to cut down, particularly on PM 2.5, beside the climate change perspective of reducing CO2 emissions. One of the things that we have a lack of often is the data availability. I've seen that here in the Philippines as well. When I went to the Ministry of Environment, they showed me their monitoring stations. Half of them were not working because they didn't have the budget to repair them. So Marcelo, you mentioned earlier on that you have the most comprehensive measurements in South America, in Chile. What is the root cause of that? Did somebody say we need that and funded it, or did the government prioritize it?
So the PM 2.5 standard required this, but also the environmental impact assessment system mandated all new sources to also implement their private measurements. Since these private measurements were not relied upon by the people, we had to put our public systems so these would be available. Now, just wanted to say that much in the line of what Chris is doing, our new phase is that we are deploying cheap monitors within Latin America with the President Bachelet's foundation for the citizen science type of a measurement. And so we want to help other countries acknowledge the fact that they have an issue, because many countries underestimate the impact. And for example, Argentina has one city measuring. Paraguay has no measurement. Venezuela has no measurement. So how could you say that there's no problem when you're not measuring anything at all?
So these are devices that basically individuals can put up in their home or in their, and then they can feed them into the open source public data, right?
Yeah, there's some cheap ones. The ones, our monitoring network costs around $1.5 million a year to operate, and each monitoring site probably $40,000 to $50,000. So it is expensive, and there's some demand to know to have these in your cities, because people know that after that the subsidies for wood burning overhauls come. So there is an incentive for congressmen and women to get you to put those sites there. But these cheap monitors, I've measured enough to know that it's pretty good. I used to pay $5,000 for a portable monitoring device, and now you can pay $300 for one. And I think they get you pretty close to what you should be seeing. And as an educational tool, it's really useful. So we're deploying these in schools to see what the effects are of other exposure issues, turning off motors when kids are getting picked up with usually, with these diesel dirty fuels. And for example, the impact of changing out a wood burning stove within a daycare system, changing it out to electrical systems and what that means for indoor air quality. All these things are really important to be looking into, especially knowing the pervasive effects that this has on COVID recovery.
Yeah, excellent. So, Krista, can you, in your system, in your open source system, accept all of that private data, or are there specific requirements for calibration or data quality when you feed the data into your system?
Yeah, so currently, as the system stands right now, that this is we're piloting out a separate system in the fall. But currently, it's catered to government sources, so data that's publicly provided by governments. And there's requirements of baseline minimum metadata requirements that that comes with geographic coordinates, it's station level information, that sort of thing. And then in the fall, we're launching a low cost sensing platform that pulls in this data, but also distinguishes it from the government sources. It has a lot of utility, but it's different sort of for a variety of reasons than in terms of quality as well for from the government data. But I would also add to the quality question in general from OpenAQ's perspective, we're this neutral aggregator where we seek to provide as much metadata and context behind the information, but we don't vouch for a given government's data or with the low-cost sensing data when that arrives for sure. So we sort of make sure the information is there transparently and also explicitly say the data is as it appears on a government site. We don't change it in a way that would misrepresent the government or somehow improve it by our view. We do have open source tools around the platform that then let you flag potentially problematic data, like repeating values or negative values that seem unrealistic, that at least can be flagged for sure. But I would actually add one thing, Marcelo made me think of it. What we've seen in terms of air quality, an interest in air quality data has happened when at a government level, when we've talked with various air quality agencies and shown neighboring country data. This happened in Colombia, actually, where we talked to the air quality agency there, where they saw air quality data from other sources. In South America, they also saw U.S. Embassy data from Bogota, and this inspired them to make their data more open too. So it's interesting, sort of the domino effect of having one or a few open data sources at the government level, how that can push other governments in the region to do the same.
Great, excellent. I know, Albert, you have done some work on trying to understand the relationship in outdoor data and indoor data, where you have compared the two. What were the conclusions work?
We have done a study or a project in a city in the Netherlands that was supported by the government, where we have put our devices inside the house. Some of the devices were also placed outside the house in a car park. And also we have access to data from the government. And we have looked at the relation between outdoor and indoor air quality. And what we have seen is that, roughly speaking, the indoor air quality is 5 times worse than outside. And then taking into consideration that you are living, or 90% of your time you're spending inside. Also, what we have seen, interestingly, that in neighborhoods where they have open fireplaces or where they have biofuel or using wood for the heating, there are a lot of complaints from the people. And there we see also high levels of PM 2.5, high levels of total volatile organic compounds. But basically speaking, and also in the Netherlands, they are focusing more and more on the indoor air quality. I think that is also something we should look at. And these affordable sensors, where they had in the beginning a lot of criticism, are they good enough? Are they reliable enough? But the quality is improving. Also, the EU devices have been tested in several laboratories, and it gives you a very good insight and also about the air quality. So hopefully this initiative will grow or will go all around the world.
We have a couple of questions that have come in. For example, here, Paeng, our expert on climate change and the healthcare sector from the Philippines, is asking whether those cheap monitors that you have deployed are calibrated with government's reference monitors.
You definitely compare them, but they're all optical, right? I mean, so they're but Albert could go into the ones he has.
Yes, because when they are produced, they are tested. They are leaving the factory when they are tested, and also we can calibrate our devices on a distance. We have developed a special program for that, and this has been recently been tested in Canada, and they've seen that we have a reliable devices also concerning the outcome. And it was basically a very interesting study they've done, because normally you have to test these devices against the very expensive equipment of the government. And they have created a theoretical model where you can test these, I would say, affordable devices. And we were chosen to be the first device tested, and the results are very good.
Linked to indoor air quality, we have two more questions. Michelle is asking, do you need a device in every room if you use them in the home? And then Greg is asking about the home air conditioning and filters. Are HEPA filters recommended?
Yeah, good question. We are recommending to have one device and which can take care of about 40 square meters. So if you have a house, you can, the advantage of this device is you can place it on everywhere in your house. So for a house, at least one device is enough, because you can also look at what's happening in your bedroom, what's happening in the kitchen. Concerning the larger equipment in the house, HEPA filters are, of course, very good, also to avoid spreading of viruses. But these are very expensive. The advantage also from the newer devices is that it can be connected to humidifiers or air purifiers. So there's a possibility. Also can be connected with APIs to the building management systems.
All right. So any other questions, please share them in the chat box to our speakers and other participants. Does anyone want to make a comment by switching on their microphone? You can as well ask a question or share a comment that way. That's possible as well. Please go ahead if that's the case. I will ask another macro question. Now, Krista and Marcelo, knowing what we know now about how quickly governments can act in the context of a crisis, but we haven't really seen that dynamic action when it comes to climate change and air pollution data that is maybe even responsible for more deaths than COVID-19, if we would accumulate them all together. How can we get an urgency for governments to take action on the macro air pollution and carbon climate change emission agenda as well?
If I may share something with you guys, I think it's really interesting. Today in Chile, every day, people look at the news whether they could drive, they could use their wood-burning stove, or whether they will be able to power their industry. And so this has gone on for 30 years. 30 years of people saying the air is bad. changes things. And so I just wanted to show, like, we do have a air quality forecasting system that we deployed that is national and allows us to see whether the air pollution is going to increase or not, and take measures beforehand, and therefore tell people whether this is, whether they'll be able to drive, whether they'll be able to light their wood burning fire, or etc. And this is really important because this created a sense of urgency that has brought a consensus that net zero is the path forward. And having electric buses and electrifying our energy system will also be a solution for this. So without the awareness of this thing, and it was brutal, because when we went from 3 episodes to 90 episodes per year, we people were calling for our heads. And when we were talking about the barbecues, that got even closer to, it was terrible. All the headlines were this is the worst day ever, the worst year ever. The press does not help you, saying we're taking a new standard. My colleagues in Mexico face the same challenge. Nobody wants to tell an honest story that we're getting better. As many press people would say, the news isn't that the lights are running correctly. The news is that the light is off. And so therefore there aren't a lot of incentives, but we survived with honesty, saying that, this was an external force that we needed to fight together. And I think that same approach could be used for climate change also.
I agree. I agree fully with Marcelo's comments. I think at the end of the day, air pollution is not a technical problem. It's a social problem. It's a political will problem, and it's getting people activated on the issue. One of the thing that has most made a very strong impression on me, and it moved me into doing OpenAQ, was watching what happened in Beijing a few years back, about a decade back, with air quality information that was generated by a few different sources in the Chinese government, where that information was suddenly much more publicly available in a way where third-party app developers could scrape that information and make apps. And all of a sudden, millions of Beijingers are walking around with real-time air quality information. The air quality hadn't really changed that year in particular versus other years. It was getting the information in a different form, in a actionable and very clear and user-friendly form that really activated the Chinese and specifically Beijing public about 10 years ago on the issue, that really pushed the Chinese government to take a lot of different actions. So to me, it's finding the technical solutions that help push social awareness. But at the end of the day, it's always about the social activation rather than any sort of technical solution or even, I think, government action, because at the end of the day, governments are pushed to do things because the public wants it. I think that came out in Marcelo's story, and I've heard as well from understanding Santiago's specific curve to improvement too.
Yeah, that is great. And I remember a similar story when I was at COP in Katowice in Poland. There was a Polish guy telling me that he realized how impactful public data is when his wife and his children were having an app and every day checking, is it healthy enough to go out today or not, based on the air quality index that was being available on their handphone. So if it becomes something that the masses care about, and that is a message on a daily level, and it's included in daily decision making, then I think we will see the impact. But I don't think we are there yet. Maybe we have that policy in Chile where you have the, app and the data there to make decisions whether people are allowed to do certain things or not. But I don't see that anywhere close in other parts of the world. So how can we get there? Is it a question of electing the right officials? When I was a teenager, we had the acid rain problem in Germany, killing our forests. Then people voted the Green Party. Suddenly, all politicians had to go green. Suddenly, legislation was implemented. Air quality issues were being enforced. 2-3 years later, we had solved the acid problem. It could be done very quickly, very efficiently, once a critical mass of people gets in. How do we get this critical mass of people on air climate change?
I think it's several avenues. I think it's several avenues of the public. I think it's several sectors that need to be activated. I don't think it comes down to just open data at all, but I do think providing information to those different sectors that push for that political will. So getting, medical doctors on the same page, getting journalists talking to scientists doing policy relevant work. Like all these different sectors, I think need to do that push. There's not like one silver bullet. Okay. Oh, yep. Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I was saying I think it's a multi-sectoral approach to the problem, and activating all those different groups. There's not like one particular group or one particular answer, or just getting government to do the thing. It takes multiple sectors getting activated. What I've seen in other places is data, for instance, in Chile is provided in a very nice format. In addition to the interface that Marcelo showed, it's also programmatically available, so people can build apps or download it to do their policy research in a very, very easy to access way. And to me, that's the transformation, is when you don't have a few people who can access the information to take it to that next impactful step, but everyone is able to get to that place and do many people pushing rather than just a few.
Yep. We have an example. We have an example in the Netherlands, a so-called citizen science project, where people measure their own indoor air quality and also outside, and sharing this data with each other. And of course, when you are a large part of the population are sharing the data with each other, also the government is looking, and they need to change, and they will change in the future. There will be coming, I think, more stronger regulations, not only concerning the outside, but also especially for the inside air quality, because it is necessary. I mean, it will come, but it takes a few years, but it will come.
Yeah, this is a question from Vonnie Garneau. When do we see formal regulation on indoor air quality coming? At the moment, enterprises don't have any limits with regards to inside factories, and maybe with COVID as well, and with the recent news about the airborne transmission, that might become a hot topic. When do you think this will come? Any one of you got an idea? Is that already in place, Marcelo, in Chile? Indoor air quality?
There's occupational standards that exist, but there's not a lot. There's external, and we need to review our external air quality issues. There's been measurements to show that, actually not every time is it that we have problems that are worse inside, but there's more outside, and we're trying to get the combustion sources out of the homes. Kerosene space heaters are very common, and we are overhauling them to take the exhaust outside. But also just wanted to mention the citizen science issue is important. I was very much inspired by the State of the Year, which is the American Lung Association report that came out when I was a professor in Fresno State as a visiting professor. And that's when I started putting out these reports, these two reports that showed the horrible problems that needed to be faced within, and so the government just couldn't respond. And so when we came into government, we just did exactly what we said we were going to do. And I think it's really important because we are held accountable to what we did, and we ended up doing quite a good job. The problem is that, people don't really acknowledge what a 30-40% reduction of pollution is, because they still see that there's a lot of things to be overcome. But I think we're pretty bad with the marketing, because, when China drops 10%, they get super good press, but when we drop 50%, we don't get nearly as good a press. But Paul Coleman's question, if I just may say so, be really fast now. Chile in 2013 had coal and hydro being the future of our energy source. And we had a big dialogue on this. There's 7,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants that were stopped by the people and by the courts. 2,000 megawatts of hydro in the Patagonia that was stopped because of the government that we led. And this really shifted the whole tide on energy. And the consensus is today it's got to be 90% renewable energy. Most new sources are solar and wind. And we did so blinking the pollution. Power plant emission standard killed, upfront capital cost for coal. The carbon tax killed operational costs, and the threat of it rising really hit the power sector substantially. And therefore, when we were dancing to this tune that I told the guys, saying, we're dancing to a song a long time, we got to put a name on it. It's no new coal, and it's end existing coal. And now we have an agreement within the government. And when we do have an agreement, we changed from a left-wing government to a right-wing government, but this economic consensus was something that was carried through, and this coal phase-out agreement is actually being implemented today. because the economics are behind it. But it started with people. The technocratic consensus was coal is great, hydro is great, and it just didn't make sense to the people, and they stopped it full-heartedly.
I see that's a great input, Marcelo, and it's wonderful to see that it's carried through. I see as well Carol Engel, the speaker from our last industry discussion, raised her hand. Carol, you want to unmute yourself and share something?
Yes. Hi, Matthias.
Welcome. Hi, Carol.
So I did want to say that, things like the Climate Mobilization Act are really being, taken into account seriously, especially here in New York, and local laws such as Local Law 97, where there are requirements that building owners are going to have to put into place by 2024 with regards to retrofitting systems in terms of water and air quality within buildings over 25,000 square feet. So we're starting to hear a lot more buzz here locally as to what people are thinking about and what they're going to have to do moving forward. And air quality is obviously a very huge part of it.
I think, Carol, it's worth mentioning as well, beside the tool that we've heard from Albert, you have something in your room that cleans up your air, the Better Air tool. Can you show it to us? I remember that from last time. This is as well a very powerful device that actually is based on organic solutions and has a lot of ways of cleaning up the air, removing mold. So there's a lot of great innovation out there that I think can increasingly be used to improve our indoor air quality together with looking at the outdoor air quality. Great stuff. Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Carol.
It disperses the probiotic into the room. This unit will cover up to 800 square feet.
Great. Excellent. Loads of good innovation out there. Anyone else that would like to ask a question or share something?
Yes, Michael. Yes, Matthias, this is Kat from the Philippines.
Hi, Kat.
Yeah, I just wonder about the various rating system in terms of indoor air quality, like, what are the requirements in terms of indoor air quality for you to get a certification?
Now we need an expert on the WELL standard. Is anyone here that is a guru on WELL? The increasingly popular standard for health and wellness inside of buildings?
Yeah. I hope I can answer a little bit your question. What we know from our experience, it is it's complex, to get the WELL certification or the BREEAM certification. But indoor air quality measuring is playing a more and more an important role. And what we know, if you have a YooHoo device in your office, you get anyway 20 to 25 points of the total you need to get a WELL certification. That's what I can say.
Yeah, Kat, I remember reading through it, and I felt it was very much suitable for new builds. They mainly reference US indoor air quality standards, I think, and World Health Organization. But the thing about WELL is it's looking holistically. It's looking at the food, at the water, at the air quality, health and fitness, wellness as a holistic concept. We have Mohammad from Pakistan as well. He mentioned in the chat box he wanted to ask a question. Maybe Mohammad, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. So I'm from Pakistan, and recently with the coronavirus and everything, initially in the early days, the country went into a complete lockdown. So for like the first 5 to 7 days, there was a drastic decrease in the air pollution, and the air quality improved a lot. And I met with the Minister of Climate Change with the proposal, like how do we go on from like what we've achieved right now or through accident or whatever, and how do we build onto that? And he's like, listen, this isn't going to work. The lockdown is a bad idea and it's not going to work. We have to open it. And I was like, why? For what reason? And he's like, listen, the air quality is amazing, but you have to realize that being a third world country, majority of the workers or the earners are daily wagers. They're bus drivers. They are people who, work for on a daily basis or a daily wage. And if we implement a lockdown and if we stop everything, it's just going to destroy their livelihood and it's going to create a bigger problem than Corona itself. So Pakistan, since then, has not implemented a lockdown. It's on a smart lockdown. Whenever they see cases, an area where there's like 25 to 30 cases in a day, they just close that area down for 14 days until the numbers come down. So that's what they're focusing on. It has unfortunately brought the air pollution. It's still not as bad as it was before, but it's not as good as it used to be during the initial days of lockdown. So the problem is that when you look at all the stakeholders, it just makes air quality as a priority. It just sends it right to the bottom. So how effective does it be, like all these solutions and all these policies, when in a country where air quality, even though it plays like a huge part, like the life expectancy because of the air quality in Pakistan is quite low as compared to, if you say, the Netherlands or Denmark or some country, or some European country. So how would a person try to convince or try to move, keeping the fact in mind that there are a lot of daily wages who depend on things that create pollution like transportation and stuff like that, and implement policies towards that side?
So what's the best balance to address maybe Marcelo and Krista, you can answer that. And I think, I'm already overstretching the time a little bit, but everybody seems to be relaxed about that. And I think we still have a very lively discussion. So I would suggest we can go for another 5 to 10 minutes and keep the questions flowing in. And then we will have just a quick wrap-up session where all of you can make your, final wisdom statement. And then I will ask Joyce, the founder of GSX, to make her wrap up, and then we should be finishing in 10 minutes at 10:15. If anyone can't make it until 10:15, then you are welcome to leave the meeting room. But on that question from Pakistan, how can we find the right balance to take the air quality serious, but at the same time not diminish the livelihood opportunities of people?
I'll chime in. I don't know the perfect answer to that really important and complicated question, Mohammed. But I will say, in Pakistan in particular, my understanding is from, again, the open data point of view, which is usually what I typically offer. There's not a ton of air quality data in that report that I mentioned. It's Pakistan is actually highlighted as one of the most populous countries where there's not a lot of available air quality data that's generated by the government that's shared. To my knowledge, there's only data that's shared in some form from Lahore. Meanwhile, I know of an initiative by Abid Omar of the Pakistan Air Quality Initiative that is putting out low-cost sensing monitors. I think they're air visual monitors in various places and sharing that information. And he's gotten a lot of traction because there's just some data that people can look at and get some sense of what's going on. So, I don't know the perfect balance of how you activate government on air quality and the public on air quality issues, and with lockdown periods as well. But I do think in the case of Pakistan, one gap is in highlighting it as an issue is there's not that, there's the annual value of like, this is how many deaths per year, but what tends to get people on a more real-time level is sort of that real-time information that is currently lacking, or really any granular information from Pakistan on air quality, to my knowledge.
I think we have one question from Paeng, which he wants to drill down a little bit more on the policies to monitor the air quality. Maybe Marcelo can respond on that. I know that Peng is looking at how can this happen in the Philippines. What could be the policies that could be implemented? We had Jeroen from Yahoo share about an EU indoor air quality project where the idea is that the data should be shared openly. So you can contact Jeroen. Then as well, Carol shared her email in case people want more info on better air. And maybe we do a wrap up round session where maybe Marcelo, you can start off with how can we really get this legislation in place that makes the air quality monitoring and the policies to control the air quality effective in developing countries, because here in Southeast Asia, I don't see an effective model yet. And I think Chile has done amazing stuff, but people don't really know about it. So please give us your final advice on that, how we could effectively disseminate that here in Southeast Asia to different countries. And then maybe Krista, you can as well share with us your final words on how we can accelerate that macro global data accessibility. And Albert, you can sum up your words of wisdom. And then after that, I'll ask Joyce to wrap up.
Thank you so much again for the invitation to speak on this. I think, the main thing is, and I worked in the World Bank also for a couple of years, and I advised some countries on how to, and showed them this approach. And a lot of them will be like, no, this will never work in the Middle East, or, things like that, because the problem is that you have to have a cultural transparency to your citizens. And so I think good governance is really important in this, and values of sharing information. And therefore, even though we don't have the capability to influence Pakistan, and maybe the way to do it is to get these monitors, because they're really unstoppable. They show a story as the U.S. embassy started this in Beijing. They started measuring and started tweeting the air is crazy dirty and stuff like that, and really got people on board. But the way that we're doing in Latin America is the Escazú Agreement. The Escazú Agreement is a human rights environmental agreement that has 3 pillars: transparency, public participation, and environmental justice. These are 3 things that allow you to really change things. Whether you are able to participate in environmental impact assessment and projects, whether you have access to environmental tribunals, whether you have access to what's you are going to be impacted by, what's the air, what's the water, all these things as a value and as a region. And this allows us to help each other out, because Bolivia has very little monitoring. We need to help them out. How to do it, technical capacity, South-South collaboration. I think these are the ways that could be done. And the geopolitical issues are complicated. And obviously we're in a populistic type of environment. We have populists presiding over, that even deny the fact that coronavirus is a threat, right? So it's a crazy environment, but the only way to fight it is with information. And not to let the misinformation win. And so therefore, this measurement really changes the story, because when you have a monitoring station, you start figuring out that it's your neighbor that's polluting you. It's not the power plant that you thought was causing the problem. It's the diesel bus that stops in front of your house. It's your own indoor cooking. You might have left on the toast for too long and you burned or incense or a candle. It really changes your awareness of what's really causing the problem. So I think information is going to be the transformational force in this.
Krista?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thanks again for the invitation to join you all. This is the first time I've joined GSX, and it's a fantastic forum. I echo a lot of what Marcelo said. I'd also add, one of the low-hanging fruits I see is that there is tons of data being produced by governments, especially air quality data. It is a low-hanging fruit to make that data more accessible in terms of at least technology or money. There's often other issues, but it's for the amount of money invested in air quality infrastructure across the world. It is a very small lift to then make that data technically available, and I think that unleashes a waterfall of actions that the public and private sector can take. And I think doing that requires pushing governments and funding organizations that support air quality programs to tie their investments to transparency and to openness, and then to define that openness precisely. What does that mean? What does fully open air quality data mean in a very granular way? And the last thing I'll do is share a link to the report in the chat box. And thank you so much.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much, Krista. Paul has shared an interesting story in the chat about tourism moving towards carbon calculation in his region. That's excellent news. Albert, your turn. I think you need to come up with an outdoor version as well for cheap data inventory, not just an indoor one. But what are your conclusions for today?
I hope that by providing affordable air quality monitors, giving insights and alerts, offering simple solutions, people can live in a safe and healthy environment. That's my statement.
Yeah. And Marcelo mentioned as well, people want to compensate their impact. I guess Marcelo is very familiar with it, but I have made my pledge to the UN FCCC Go Climate Neutral Now campaign. Actually, if you Google it, everybody can sign up to it, where you basically say, I'm going to monitor, I'm going to reduce, and I'm compensate my carbon footprint to be climate neutral. Can be done for individuals, for organizations. That might be a good step forward to take practical action. Joyce has had problems with her internet connection, so I will call in Tom to give us some final words of wisdom. He is as well part of the management team of GSX. And thank you so much for all the speakers. We had great input, great contributions, great case studies. I think we need to work together on this. I even feel like here in Asia, we need to talk to the ADB, the Asian Development Bank. I used to be a consultant there as well, to ramp up the data availability and the monitors out there to get really the data to speak to people and ride on the wave of the concern now. So that might be something Pang and a couple of other people, Gerald from Hong Kong, we can talk about here and take forward from this event and maybe do a concerted effort there. So Tom, are you there? Can you unmute yourself and maybe wrap things up?
I am here, and thank you, Matthias. I want to also, on behalf of the Global Sustainability Exchange, thank the speakers, Marcelo, Albert, and Krista, and a special thanks to you, Matthias, for doing a fabulous job of facilitating a very rich conversation. Global Sustainability Exchange is still evolving, but the ambition is to become the one-stop shop for sustainability solutions in the built space. We're very excited about the potential that it has. Building a following and community through rich dialogue like this is really important to us. And so I thank you all for your time and attention today. Our next event will be in about 3 weeks, and we're going to have hope to have a more regular programming schedule. So with that, we'll sign off, and thank you again. I hope you all stay safe and stay well, and look for more information. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.